The house watched from the crest of the hill, a skeletal silhouette against the bruised twilight. It stood alone, shrouded in an eerie silence, separated from the town below by a winding, overgrown road, and an unseen history of whispers and shadows. Its windows, like vacant eyes, stared out blindly, reflecting the dying light in a dull, lifeless sheen. The paint, once a cheerful yellow, had faded to a sickly, jaundiced hue, peeling like scabs from the warped and weathered wood. The front porch sagged wearily, its once grand pillars rotting, consumed by dry rot and infested with insects. The rusted swing set swayed gently in the growing breeze, its melancholic creak the only sound that dared to break the oppressive silence that clung to the house like a shroud. 4 figures, silhouetted against the dying light, approached cautiously, their laughter and chatter fading with each step closer to the imposing structure. The house loomed ahead, its darkened windows like eyes watching their every move. The path they walked on was overgrown, nature reclaiming what had once been a well-trodden route. Each step they took seemed to echo in the stillness of the evening, a reminder of the isolation that surrounded them. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, adding to the eerie atmosphere that enveloped them. There was Mark, the self-proclaimed leader, his bravado a thin veil for the unease that flickered in his eyes. He had always been the one to push boundaries, to seek out the unknown, but tonight, even he felt the weight of the house's ominous presence. His mind raced with thoughts of what lay inside, each possibility more unsettling than the last. Yet he couldn't show his fear, the others looked to him for guidance, and he couldn't afford to falter now. Next to him walked Sarah, her skepticism a shield against the growing sense of dread. She had always been the voice of reason, the one to question and doubt, but even her logical mind couldn't dismiss the chill that ran down her spine. The stories they had heard about the house played on a loop in her head, each one more terrifying than the last. She kept her eyes on the path, avoiding the house's gaze as if acknowledging it would make the legends true. John, the quiet observer, trailed behind, his gaze darting nervously between the house and the rapidly darkening sky. He had always been the one to notice the little things, the details others overlooked, and tonight was no different. The way the shadows seemed to stretch and twist, the way the wind whispered through the trees, it all set his nerves on edge. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something unseen was lurking just out of sight. Bringing up the rear was Emily, her youthful curiosity battling with a primal instinct to turn and run. She had always been fascinated by the unknown, drawn to the mysteries that others shied away from, but tonight, her curiosity felt like a dangerous gamble. The house seemed to call to her, a siren song that promised answers but hinted at danger. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead, determined not to let fear get the better of her. They were strangers, drawn together by a shared thirst for adventure, a desire to explore the mysteries whispered about in hushed tones by the townsfolk. Each had their own reasons for being there, their own demons to face, but tonight, they were united by a common goal. The house had a reputation, a dark history that intrigued and terrified in equal measure. They had heard the stories, the warnings, but their curiosity had overridden their caution. They wanted to see for themselves, to uncover the truth behind the legends. They came seeking thrills, unaware that the house had already claimed them as its own. The moment they set foot on the path, they had crossed a threshold, one that marked the boundary between the known and the unknown. The house seemed to pulse with a life of its own, its very walls whispering secrets and promises. They were drawn to it, unable to resist its call, like moths to a flame. Each step brought them closer to the truth, but also closer to the danger that awaited them. The air grew heavy as they climbed the crumbling steps to the porch, the scent of decay thick in their nostrils. The wood creaked under their weight, each groan a reminder of the house's age and neglect. The porch was littered with debris, remnants of a time long past, and the windows were dark and empty like soulless eyes. They paused for a moment, taking in the sight before them, each lost in their own thoughts. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for them to make the next move. A sudden gust of wind slammed the front door shut with a resounding boom that echoed through the empty street, sending a shiver down their spines. The sound was jarring, a stark contrast to the silence that had enveloped them moments before. It was as if the house was warning them, telling them to turn back while they still could, but they were too far gone, their curiosity too strong to be deterred by a mere door. They exchanged nervous glances, each wondering if they had made a mistake but none willing to voice their doubts. Mark, forcing a laugh, stepped forward and tested the doorknob. His hand trembled slightly, betraying the fear he tried so hard to hide. The metal was cold and unyielding, a stark reminder of the barrier between them and whatever lay inside. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come, and turned the knob. The sound of the latch releasing was almost deafening in the silence, a final warning that they were about to cross a line from which there was no return. It turned with a groan, and the heavy oak door creaked open, revealing a darkness so profound that it seemed to devour the light. The air that wafted out was stale and cold, carrying with it the scent of dust and neglect. They hesitated, peering into the abyss, each wondering what horrors lay hidden within. The house seemed to beckon them, its darkness a promise of secrets and revelations. With a final glance at each other, they stepped over the threshold, leaving the safety of the known world behind. The interior of the house was a labyrinth of shadows and dust. Each room seemed to hold its own secrets, hidden beneath layers of grime and neglect. The walls, once vibrant with life, now stood as silent witnesses to the passage of time, their surfaces marred by the slow creep of decay. Cobwebs hung like macabre decorations from every corner, their delicate threads shimmering in the faint light that managed to penetrate the gloom. It was as if the house itself had been wrapped in a shroud, a testament to years of abandonment and neglect. The air was thick with the scent of decay and forgotten things. It was a smell that clung to the back of the throat, a reminder of the lives that had once filled these rooms with laughter and sorrow. Now, only the echoes of those emotions remained, trapped within the walls. A single, flickering light bulb illuminated the foyer, casting long, distorted shadows that danced on the walls like phantoms. The light was weak, barely enough to push back the darkness that seemed to press in from all sides, but it was enough to reveal the outlines of the room. As they stepped inside, the floorboards groaned in protest, their moans echoing through the silent house like the whispers of the dead. Each step was a reminder of the house's age, the wood beneath their feet worn and brittle from years of disuse. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the sound of their own breathing and the frantic beating of their hearts. It was a silence that seemed to amplify every noise, every creak and rustle, turning them into something almost sinister. "Hello?" Sarah's voice echoed through the empty house, swallowed by the oppressive silence. Her words seemed to hang in the air for a moment before being absorbed by the darkness, leaving only the memory of sound behind. There was no reply, only the rustling of unseen things in the darkness. It was a sound that set their nerves on edge, a reminder that they were not alone in this place, even if they could not see what else was there. They moved cautiously through the house, each room a reflection of forgotten lives, frozen in time. The furniture, covered in dust, stood as silent sentinels, guarding the memories of those who had once called this place home. A half-finished game of chess lay abandoned on a table in the parlor, the pieces covered in a thick layer of dust. It was as if the players had simply vanished, leaving their game unfinished, a snapshot of a moment lost to time. A child's doll lay discarded on the floor of a nursery, its porcelain face cracked and staring blankly at the ceiling. The room, once filled with the sounds of laughter and play, was now a silent tomb. The doll, a ghostly reminder of the life that had once filled it. Old family portraits lined the walls, their faces faded and covered in dust. These images, once cherished, now seemed to watch over the house with a mournful gaze, their eyes following the intruders as they moved from room to room. A broken window allowed a cold breeze to enter, causing the tattered curtains to flutter like ghostly apparitions. The wind carried with it the faint sounds of the outside world, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence within the house. In one corner of the house an old piano stood, its keys covered in dust. Once it had filled the house with music, but now it was silent, its voice lost to the years. The sight of it was a poignant reminder of the passage of time and the inevitability of decay. The attic was a treasure trove of forgotten items, each one a relic of the past. Boxes filled with old letters, toys, and clothes were stacked haphazardly, their contents a testament to the lives that had once been lived here. It was a place where memories had been stored and then forgotten, left to gather dust in the darkness. An old mirror, its surface clouded with dust, reflected the room in a distorted, eerie way. It was as if the mirror held its own secrets, showing a version of the house that was both familiar and unsettling. The reflection seemed to move on its own, a ghostly echo of the past. On a table an old book lay open, its pages yellowed with age. The words, though faded, told stories of a time long past, a time when the house had been filled with life. Now, the book was just another relic, a silent witness to the passage of time. The hallway stretched out before them, dark and empty. Each step they took was accompanied by the creaking of the floorboards, a sound that seemed to echo through the house like a warning. It was a place where the past and present seemed to collide, creating an atmosphere of unease and mystery. An old clock on the wall ticked away the seconds, its hands moving slowly, almost reluctantly. It was a reminder that time, though it had seemed to stand still in this house, was still moving forward. The clock's steady ticking was a comforting sound, a small piece of normalcy in an otherwise eerie place. The staircase leading to the upper floor was steep and narrow, each step covered in a thick layer of dust. It was a daunting climb, the darkness at the top seeming to hold its own secrets, but they knew they had to continue, to uncover the mysteries that lay hidden within the house. On a table, an old photograph album lay open, its pages filled with images of the past. The faces in the photographs looked out with expressions of joy and sorrow, capturing moments that had long since faded into memory. It was a poignant reminder of the lives that had once been lived within these walls. In one corner of the room, an old rocking chair sat, its wood creaking softly as it moved back and forth. It was as if the chair was still occupied, still holding the memory of the person who had once sat there. The sight of it was both comforting and unsettling, a reminder of the passage of time and the inevitability of change. On a desk, an old typewriter sat, its keys covered in dust. Once, it had been used to write letters and stories, to capture the thoughts and dreams of the people who had lived here. Now, it was silent, a relic of a time long past. The sight of it was a reminder of the power of words, and the way they can capture moments and memories, even as time moves on. An old lamp stood in the corner, its shade covered in dust. Once it had provided light and warmth, but now it was just another relic, a silent witness to the passage of time. The sight of it was a reminder of the way things change, and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The curtains, once vibrant and colorful, were now faded and covered in dust. They hung limply at the windows, their fabric worn and brittle. It was a poignant reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most familiar things. The sight of them was both comforting and unsettling, a reminder of the way things change, and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The fireplace, once the heart of the home, was now cold and empty. Its hearth was covered in dust, and the logs that had once provided warmth and light were now just a pile of ashes. The sight of it was a reminder of the way things change, and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. It was a poignant reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most familiar things. The chandelier, once a symbol of elegance and grandeur, was now covered in dust. Its crystals, once sparkling and bright, were now dull and lifeless. The sight of it was a reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most beautiful things. It was a poignant reminder of the way things change, and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The wardrobe, once filled with clothes and accessories, was now empty and covered in dust. Its doors hung open, revealing the emptiness inside. The sight of it was a reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most familiar things. It was a poignant reminder of the way things change, and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The bed, once a place of rest and comfort, was now covered in dust. Its sheets were worn and brittle, and the mattress sagged in the middle. The sight of it was a reminder of the passage of time and the way it can change even the most familiar things. It was a poignant reminder of the way things change and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The chair, once a place of rest and relaxation, was now covered in dust. Its fabric was worn and brittle, and the wood was cracked and splintered. The sight of it was a reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most familiar things. It was a poignant reminder of the way things change, and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The table, once a place of gathering and conversation, was now covered in dust. Its surface was worn and scratched, and the legs were wobbly and unstable. The sight of it was a reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most familiar things. It was a poignant reminder of the way things change, and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The bookshelf, once filled with books and knickknacks, was now empty and covered in dust. Its shelves were warped and sagging, and the wood was cracked and splintered. The sight of it was a reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most familiar things. It was a poignant reminder of the way things change and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The rug, once a place of warmth and comfort, was now covered in dust. Its fabric was worn and brittle, and the colors had faded to a dull, lifeless hue. The sight of it was a reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most familiar things. It was a poignant reminder of the way things change, and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The vase, once a symbol of beauty and elegance, was now covered in dust. Its surface was cracked and chipped, and the flowers that had once filled it were now long gone. The sight of it was a reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most familiar things. It was a poignant reminder of the way things change, and the way they stay the same, even as the years go by. The painting, once a symbol of creativity and expression, was now covered in dust. Its colors had faded, and the canvas was cracked and brittle. The sight of it was a reminder of the passage of time, and the way it can change even the most familiar things. It was a poignant reminder of the... As they explored further, the house seemed to press in around them, its silence becoming a suffocating presence. The walls, covered in peeling wallpaper, seemed to whisper secrets of the past, and the floorboards creaked under their hesitant steps. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, making them question what was real and what was imagined. John noticed it first. The doors, left open, were now closed, as if pulled shut by an unseen hand. The sound of the doors closing echoed through the hallways, a chilling reminder that they were not alone. He felt a shiver run down his spine as he tried to rationalize what he had just witnessed. "Did you do that?" John asked, his voice tight with apprehension. His eyes darted around, searching for any sign of a prank or trick, but the expressions on his friends' faces told him they were just as bewildered as he was. "Do what?" Mark shot back, his bravado beginning to falter. He tried to maintain a confident facade, but the tremor in his voice betrayed his growing fear. The house seemed to be playing with them, testing their nerves. "The doors," John pointed, his hand trembling slightly. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, each beat louder than the last. The air around them felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. They were open, now they're closed. His voice was barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might provoke the house further. The others turned to look, their faces pale with fear. Emily's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She had always been the skeptic, the one to dismiss ghost stories and haunted houses. But now, standing in the midst of this eerie silence, she couldn't deny the palpable sense of dread that enveloped them. The air grew thick with unspoken fear, the silence taking on a sinister quality. Every creak, every distant sound seemed amplified, feeding their growing paranoia. They exchanged nervous glances, each one silently asking the same question: what was happening? They were no longer exploring, they were being watched. The feeling of unseen eyes following their every move was almost unbearable. It was as if the house itself was alive, aware of their presence, and intent on keeping them within its walls. Panic began to rise within their chests, a cold, creeping dread that sank its teeth into their resolve. They could feel the walls closing in, the space around them shrinking. Their breaths came in short, shallow gasps as they fought to maintain their composure. They quickened their pace, their footsteps echoing loudly in the oppressive silence. The sound of their hurried movements seemed to mock their fear, each step a reminder of their growing desperation to escape. But each room they entered led only to another, the house seeming to twist and turn in on itself, a maze with no exit. The corridors stretched endlessly, each turn leading them deeper into the labyrinth. It was as if the house was a living entity, reshaping itself to trap them within its dark embrace.